Hello everyone. Beneath the basement of a home in Jericho, Long Island, New York, sat an iron barrel weighing hundreds of pounds. The house containing this barrel had passed through many owners' hands, yet for 30 years that iron barrel remained unopened. Finally, on a beautiful day, a man driven by curiosity decided to pry it open and explore. And just like that, a horrifying secret hidden for 30 years was unveiled. The story takes place in 1999 in New York State, USA. This state, located in the northeast of the country, is renowned as one of America's most economically vibrant regions. Today we'll travel to Jericho, a small town on Long Island in Nassau County. Here, a homeowner named Ronald Cohen, who had lived in the house for 9 years, stumbled upon something he could never forget in his lifetime. On a day in 1999, Ronald decided to sell his house and move elsewhere. While clearing out the place, he discovered an iron barrel that would change his life forever. Let's turn back the clock to September 2nd, 1999. On September 2nd, 1999, a Thursday, Ronald Cohen, the homeowner, was planning to sell his house and relocate. He had already cleared out unnecessary items so the new buyers could move in any time. That early morning, Ronald hired a group of movers along with a truck to come to his house. They skillfully hauled out furniture, both big and small, and some discarded items. But the job hadn't gone on long when one of the movers hit a snag. He spotted a large iron barrel in the crawl space beneath the house. Its surface was rusted, the writing on it no longer legible. Perhaps it had been there for years. The mover stepped forward, tried to lift it, but despite his best efforts, the barrel wouldn't budge. He called for help. 2 others rushed down to assist, and it took all 3 of them straining hard to drag the barrel from the crawl space to the open yard in front of the house. One of them said to Ronald, "This thing's too heavy. We can't load it onto the truck for you. We've dragged it this far, but you'll have to figure out what to do with it yourself." Ronald looked at the barrel and suddenly recalled that it had been in the crawl space since he moved in 9 years earlier, back in 1990. At the time, he'd wanted to get rid of it to free up space, but it was too heavy to move, so he left it there for 9 years. The more he thought about it, the more curious he grew, wondering what could be inside to make it so heavy. He grabbed a crowbar, returned to the yard, and started prying at the lid. When it popped open, a foul, overpowering stench hit him square in the face, leaving him reeling. He caught a glimpse of something dark inside. Though repulsed, his curiosity pushed him to endure the smell and look closer. Inside was a shoe and a human hand. Terrified, Ronald staggered back a few steps, ran into the house, and immediately called the police. It wasn't long before the police arrived at the scene. They set up a perimeter around the barrel to keep curious onlookers at bay. The discovery of the barrel shattered the quiet of the small town of Jericho. Residents gathered, buzzing with speculation. The police made a preliminary assessment that there was a body inside, but to avoid contaminating evidence, they didn't open it further and took the entire barrel to the lab. The barrel had a capacity of about 55 gallons, 208 liters, and weighed around 350 pounds. Technicians spent nearly 3 hours painstakingly removing everything inside. Inside the barrel was the body of a woman. She was neatly dressed, but her clothing was outdated, reminiscent of 1960s fashion. The barrel also contained a large number of black and white plastic pellets, along with a green liquid, later identified as chemical dye. Everything inside was soaked in that liquid. The police found a handbag containing a makeup kit, a comb, an eyelash curler, and a dress book, 2 metal rings, one engraved with EMS, and a metal necklace inscribed with "To Patrick." Among the items, the address book was the most critical. If they could decipher its contents, they might identify the victim. But the book had been submerged in the liquid for so long that it was soft and fragile, nearly falling apart, its contents almost impossible to fully recover. The autopsy revealed the victim was a woman, 9 months pregnant. The cause of death: was multiple blows to the back of her head with a blunt object. Investigators began searching for her identity, focusing on a petite woman from El Salvador, about 5 feet tall, listed among missing persons in New York State. But this description was too vague, matching too many cases, so the police shifted their investigation to the evidence inside the barrel. The iron barrel still bore a serial number and the name of a chemical factory. The police traced it to a plant in New Jersey. There, they learned the barrel was manufactured in 1965 to hold dye, and that this type of dye had ceased production by 1971. Meanwhile, they questioned Ronald Cohen, asking where he got the barrel. Ronald explained that when he moved into the house in 1990, it was already in the crawl space. He'd been curious but noticed the chemical label and decided against opening it. Ronald remained calm, showing no signs of deception, so the police ruled him out as a suspect. Digging further, the police discovered the house had had 4 owners. By contacting previous owners, they determined the barrel dated back to the first owner in the 1960s, a man named Howard Elkins, now retired and living in Boca Raton, Florida. The police spoke to elderly neighbors around Jericho. They recalled that Howard Elkins had been a major shareholder in Melrose Plastics, a company in Manhattan that produced plastic products. Hearing plastics, the police immediately connected it to the large quantity of plastic pellets in the barrel. Could there be a link? Following this lead, the police found that Howard Elkins had run Melrose Plastics in the 1960s, a company specializing in plastic decorations. It had once purchased a batch of dye from the New Jersey plant to color its products. News of the woman in the barrel quickly spread through the media. Soon after, the police received an anonymous call. The caller said, "I know a few secrets about that barrel. It was used to hold chemicals. I don't know who was inside, but I know Howard Elkins, a shareholder in the plastics company, had a romantic relationship with a woman there in the 1960s. This was the very person the police were targeting, further solidifying their suspicions. The police decided to confront Howard Elkins for questioning. By then, he was 70, retired, and living in Boca Raton, Florida. When they arrived on September 9th, 1999, Howard was uncooperative, reluctantly letting them into his home. They showed him a photo of the barrel and asked, "Did your company ever use this type of barrel?" Howard replied, "My factory never used iron barrels like that." The police pressed, "Did you ever use green dye?" Howard answered, "We didn't use dye, no chemicals needed." But prior investigation revealed Melrose Plastics had purchased dye. Howard was clearly lying. The more he denied, the more the police suspected he was their man. They asked, "Have you ever had an affair?" Surprisingly, Howard admitted to an extramarital relationship over 30 years ago, but claimed he couldn't even remember what the woman looked like because it was so long ago. The police brought a DNA kit. By 1999, DNA technology was highly advanced, a game changer for investigations. If they could get Howard's DNA, they could confirm whether he was the father of the fetus in the barrel. They asked, "Can you provide a DNA sample?" Howard called the request absurd and kicked the police out of his house. Back at the lab, efforts to recover evidence from the barrel continued. After much work, technicians restored part of the address book. The second line on one page clearly read, "Mr. Elkins," with an address and phone number, though it was no longer reachable. On another page was Kathy Miranda, with a phone number. The police called and reached Kathy. They explained the whole story. Upon hearing it, Kathy immediately said, "The pregnant woman in the barrel is Reina Marroquin." She explained that Reina was from El Salvador and over 30 years ago had worked with her at Melrose Plastics in Manhattan. The two had grown close while working in that environment. In 1969, Reina Angelica Marroquin, 27 years old, came to New York from El Salvador alone. She worked at Melrose Plastics, a company making plastic goods. Rayner had a wonderful personality, was hard-working, and dreamed of becoming a US citizen. Kathy recalled that before disappearing, Rayner told her she was pregnant, but didn't reveal the father's identity, only that he was married with kids. Kathy asked, "Will he marry you?" Rayner replied, "Of course he will." But later, Rayner called Kathy, saying she'd realized the man had no intention of marrying her. That night, Rayner called the man's house, but his wife picked up. Rayner spilled everything about the affair and the pregnancy. The man called back furious, threatening to kill her. Panicked, Rayner confided in Kathy over the phone. Worried, Kathy went to Rayner's place, found the door unlocked, but Rayner was gone. Kathy waited 3 hours, tried reaching her but got nothing, then reported it to the police. At the time, to protect Rayner's reputation, Kathy didn't mention the threat. The police assumed Rayner had just gone somewhere, and the disappearance faded into oblivion. Until 30 years later, when the truth came to light. Hearing Kathy's account, the police believed Howard Elkins was the mystery man who'd had an affair with Rayner. They suspected that night Howard lured Rayner to Melrose Plastics, killed her, and brought her body to his Jericho home. He might have planned to dump her at sea, so he stuffed her into a dye barrel and added plastic pellets from his company to weigh it down. But at 350 pounds, it was too heavy for Howard to move to a boat alone. Desperate, he hid it in the crawl space for 30 years unnoticed by anyone. If Ronald Cohen hadn't been curious enough to open the barrel, this secret might have stayed buried forever. With this evidence, the police listed Howard Elkins as their prime suspect and sought a warrant for his DNA. But when they returned on September 10, 1999, Howard's wife said he had vanished. Eventually, he was found dead in his garage in Boca Raton, Florida, slumped in the back seat of his car, blood everywhere, a shotgun beside him. The police determined he'd taken his own life. They collected Howard's DNA, and it matched the fetus with 99.93% certainty, confirming their theory. The truth was out, but with Howard dead, the full details of the case couldn't be clarified further. A reporter named Oscar Cora covered the case for Newsday. He even traveled to El Salvador to find Rayner's family and met her mother, then 95 years old. When she learned her daughter had been found after 30 years, she broke down in tears. All she'd ever wanted was to see Rayner again, but Rayner had paid with her life for a tragic love triangle. On the last page of the address book, there was a line, possibly written by Rayner to Howard. "Don't hate me for telling the truth. See you in the next video. Goodbye."